This is Comic Geek Speak, episode 1884. Oh, Thor. Oh, Ultraman. Oh, my.
Shane, you shave your face?
I did shave my face. I did.
Trying to recapture your youth?
No, I went to Florida.
Oh.
What?
We went down to Florida for a week last week on vacation.
Oh, nice.
I wanted to not sweat my full ass off. So I shaved.
I take it you drove.
Nope, we flew.
For the first time since 1996.
First time since 96. Got on the plane. Came back on a plane.
This is huge.
He got his milk.
Yeah, it was good. I'm going to have to fly for work in the next couple of years at some point, and I'd rather fly with the family than with work the first time. And the boys had never been on a plane, so we talked about it, and we were going to drive just because of the cost right now. Flying so darn expensive, and we talked it over and just decided to fly. So on a plane we went.
Were you able to get home on time?
Yeah. We had no time-wise and all that. We had no problem at all.
Excellent.
It was good. Yep. Flew down on a Sunday, came back on a Saturday.
It was everybody, the two boys and you and Carly.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. We went down to see the mouse.
Wow. Because I know you said in the past that it's like you didn't want to go because, but I don't know if it's superstitious, but you just didn't want to go like you and Carlene and like the boys would be abandoned. And
yeah. Well, now that they're older, I mean, 21 and 18, they're old.
You don't care.
Yeah, that's it. It's
not your problem.
Yeah. They'll be taken care of. We have insurance. So yeah.
Wow, that is huge. How'd you feel about that?
I was not as nervous as I thought I would be. And part of that was because Matt, the younger one, was a little bit nervous because Ben could have cared less. For him, it was like taking a nap. I was really impressed. He could have cared less. Matt was a little bit nervous, and it helped me not to be nervous because I was trying to be calm for him. So if he saw how panicky I might have been at first, he would have been worse. So I just tried not to be. Tried to read a couple things that didn't work. So then I watched couple movies, a movie or a couple TV shows on the iPad.
Right.
So it worked well.
Yeah.
So I got to see, and Adam heard this last night, got to see Galaxy's Edge for the first time. That was really cool. Rode Smuggler's Run and Rise of the Resistance. And that was awesome.
Wait, what is all that?
Star Wars
World or whatever.
Down in Hollywood Studios.
Right. Okay.
So that was really cool. Not so thrilled about the nickel and diming you to get on and off rides anymore versus just the straight fast passes that they used to have. But once we kind of got our feet wet and figured out what to do, we were okay. So here's another thing. So the only thing I hate as much as flying is roller coasters. And Carlene and the boys kind of encouraged me, and we went on Guardians of the Galaxy in Epcot, which is massive roller coaster indoors. And that was fun. I don't know that I could have done it right away that day or the next week, and it's near impossible to get on last week, but we got on it once. I did it, and then I can say that I did it. So that I had all kinds of adventures last week.
Damn, big steps.
Yeah. And then we did things like we went to the cantina and had drinks on the Saturday morning we were leaving. That was really cool. That was a lot of fun. The Thursday before we left, we had booked to have the boys build lightsabers. I already have my favorite lightsaber, which is Obi-Wan Kenobi's Phantom Menace lightsaber. Pants helped get it when he was out in California one time a few years ago. So I was cool. But then Ben really didn't want to build a lightsaber. So then I built a lightsaber. And I bought an extra crystal, a couple, so we'd have different colors to switch in and out. So I put a yellow one in here.
Nice.
And
cool.
part of that's because of the first toy lightsaber that came out in '78 that I had was a flashlight with a yellow filter and a blow up tube that you attach to the flashlight. So I wanted a yellow crystal, and since they sold them, I'm like, well, damn, I'll pick that up and put it in. So it was cool. It was a lot of fun. Carlene said after we were done, she's like, so what'd you think of it? And I said, I'm not going to lie, I was smiling ear to ear. It was a neat experience to put it all together and kind of be engrossed in that performance. It was a lot of fun. So yeah, it was a good trip. So hopefully more to come and more places to go in the future.
Yeah. Now you can fly all over the world.
Yeah, I was thinking after work today, I was eating dinner. I'm thinking, where should we go next?
Yeah.
How soon can we do it? I could go for a weekend somewhere.
There was I just got, you can go to round trip to Dublin on St. Patrick's Day for $453.
Wow.
Nice. Well, and so that's another kind of caveat to this, because when Matt's in his senior year, junior summer to senior, or senior after he graduates college, I want the four of us, and if they've got girlfriends, married, whatever, I want to go to Ireland for like 2 weeks. And so I've got to start flying somehow to get there because I'm not swimming. But that's something that I've talked about for years, and kind of Carlene and I sort of on the peripheral keep trying to keep in perspective to plan, so that in a couple of years we'll go over to Ireland for a while. It's just some place that I've always wanted to see.
It's beautiful.
And I don't want to go to Dublin. I want to go outskirts, small towns.
Well, you fly to Dublin, then you drive wherever you want to go.
Yeah. I don't want to stay in Dublin. No. It's fine, but I want to go outwards.
Yeah. It's castles everywhere.
Yeah.
What is your last name? Like, what's your last
Irish.
Names? Oh, it is Irish. Okay.
My dad had always said, and I found it in various books, and we have some of those name placards that you can get with like the meaning and all that. But my dad had said that really, really back in the day, it was O'Maholland. I've only ever seen it as Mulholland, but he said that most things were this, that, and like O'Malley, whatever. So he said he thought it was O'Maholland hundreds of years ago, but it's always just been Mulholland as far as I've known.
That sounds like he was trying to pull your leg.
Because it sounds really stupid, O'Maholland.
Yeah.
But
well, Shane, if you have any genealogical stuff, right? Like if great grandparents came on the boat or whatever, right?
No, I wish I did.
But if you know where they came from, basically you go to that town, go to the library, and the librarian will immediately help you figure out, like look through books and microfiche and figure, like they got records from, hundreds of years ago because they're like super into it, right? So
cool.
They're very helpful. When I was there, my grandmother was totally wrong, and I went to a town and I went to the library, and the woman was like, that name, no one around here has the name, but let's check the books anyway. And we spent like an hour going over stuff. She's like, yeah, there's nothing here. And I was like, okay, well, yeah. But I tried, I went where my grandmother told me to go, and she was totally wrong, but
yeah,
happy to help me be wrong.
Was it Odemer?
No. Yeah, the Germans and the Irish just blended together there. No problem. Yeah.
I do want to do that with Germany. That's like because ever since I traced my dad's family lineage back to the early 1600s, so I know what town.
Oh wow,
the family came from, the whole 9 yards. And actually, the last one that I found, he was apparently like some type of judge and something else. So I figured there has to be records.
Yeah,
in there. But going through that process, I found out when my dad's family came over in 1749 that actually our last name was Meyer, Meyer. And it got changed again with the integration into the United States. And I got changed to the O. So
yeah, I really should get on some websites and start digging around a little bit.
You'd be surprised what you find.
Some of that out.
Be surprised.
We have friends through the boys playing soccer all those years that there's one friend in particular, he has from both his mom and his dad's side, he's got records back to when they came over on the boat, way back 1700s. So that would be really cool to have all that kind of documentation, but we don't have near that much. But it would be cool.
Adam, where are the Murdos from?
Oh, Scotland originally.
Oh.
Apparently it's Scotch-Irish. They carpet-bagged to Ireland, lived down there for a couple of generations, and then came over here to New England sometime in the early 18th. Yeah. I think the earliest record of the name is in New Hampshire someplace back in those days.
That's cool.
Loosely translated, the name means sea warrior.
Oh, okay, Aquaman.
Wow.
Nice.
Imperious Rex.
Where's your wings?
He's on dry land right now.
Wait, who hasn't seen Wakanda Forever yet?
I haven't.
I haven't.
I saw it.
I haven't seen it either. So I just
February
want,
1st on Disney Plus.
yeah, I'm real curious about Namor. I'm real curious about that. That should be
Yes,
interesting.
I'm curious too.
Yeah, that should be interesting. Yeah.
Keeping my mouth shut.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's no Sue Richards, so I don't know what they're gonna do. You know.
Yeah, right?
Give him time.
Yep.
Yeah.
One can only hope.
Horny man of the sea. No, you know what though? To get a little nerdy about it, geeky about it, I'm reading through Marvel Saga. You remember that from the 80s?
Oh yeah.
Sure.
Total reference material. They basically take panels from from 25 years of Marvel comics and try to pull like I just read issue 13, which has the origin of Daredevil, and they pull not only the first stuff from Daredevil #1, but they pull like Frank Miller's or the addition stuff that he put in with Elektra, and he kind of recreated some scenes from the original origin. So they throw it all together, right? So it's like 25 years of Daredevil's origin. But so you're not necessarily reading all of Marvel's earliest comics from 1961, 62, 63, but you're getting the highlight reel. And it's all through Peter Sanderson's filter. He was the writer and the researcher. But every time they bring up Namor, they always make a point to talk about, his attraction to Sue and the few panels that they do show, it's always Sue kind of protecting him and saying things like, he turned on his people or whatever, he's trying to do the noble thing, so we should let him go. He's a tortured man. And then like another scene, Namor's grabbing her and trying to marry her, and she's like, no, but then he again helps her escape. And what a weird relationship those two had in those early days before she was married to before she got married to Reed Richards. And I was listening to a podcast, Culture Trapping, and Martheus Wade is on it, and so is Daryl Taylor, Julian Lytle, Sean Pryor. I mean, it's like all people we know.
Nice.
And Martheus made a point, and he was talking about that, and he was also talking about like Jean Grey and Wolverine and Cyclops and some other, and like the White Queen, and he made a joke and he said, Marvel women are kind of sketchy. They're kind of, they're a little, that's a little weird. But yeah, when you read those early stories with Sue and Namor, you can see why there's, Reed is just totally oblivious, right? Like, it's like, I would have been like, what's going on here with the fish man? Come on. Anyway.
But doesn't it also kind of fit in essence because, he's supposed to be so focused on, he's always distracted, always focusing on, how many different projects going on at the same time, so that's where his focus has always been, because you always saw those scenes like Sue coming in and he's not even hardly paying attention to her. And, so.
Right. And Stan Lee was so big on putting every bit of drama in all those books. Like, it's not only a superhero book, they're romance books. Like those early Thor stories almost feel like they're Superman Lois stories, because it's always a triangle between Donald Blake, Jane Foster, and Thor. So there's superhero stuff, there's romance stuff, there's it's the other one that now that you mentioned that about Reed and Sue, Janet and Hank had the same relationship where he was always so busy and she was always like in love with him, and I was thinking about it, and I was like, Sue and Janet. We need an early story of Sue and Janet going on like a coffee date, talking about their scientists.
Escapades.
Yeah, they're scientist boyfriends who are totally oblivious.
Meanwhile, they're on a secret mission for the government together.
Yeah, right.
Talking about their women problems.
The other thing that came up, and I really like doing it this way, so I don't have to actually go. I don't know, Kevin, if you've read a lot of that early stuff, or if anybody has read like the first 20 issues of Fantastic Four and the first 20 issues of Tales of Suspense and the first 20 issues of Thor. Like, I'm sure they're kind of probably a little difficult to get through, but to get just the highlights I'm like, okay, I can do it like this.
Yeah.
The other thing that is funny is, so when Alicia Masters gets introduced, Ben up to that point has like a slight crush on Sue. Like there's dialogue, especially prior to him turning into the Thing, about, this little crush. Alicia Masters apparently is supposed to look like Sue Storm. So much that in the first appearance of Puppet Master, he dresses her up like Sue Storm to like go into the mansion or something like that, or into the Baxter building. So there's that little connection, right? Mm-hmm. Then when Hank Pym first meets Janet, he says, "Oh, she looks like Maria, my wife that got stolen away by the Russians, only younger." He says, "Oh, she looks like Maria, but only younger." And then when Captain America wakes up in Avengers 4, he looks at Rick Jones and goes, "Oh, Bucky." So it's like you got all these characters that apparently are supposed to look like other people. And clearly it's a comic book trope, Stan Lee's just hitting the same bell over and over again.
Right.
But very interesting if you want to sort of contextualize it into modern terms of like all these characters that kind of look alike for one reason or another. It's very bizarre. I don't know if anybody has come across any of that.
I never bridged that like that.
No, me either.
It's very interesting for your point of view, because I never caught that. I mean, obviously the individual things, but I never strung it together like that. So,
which is why reading that Marvel Saga is so fun, because you start to see, and again, it's all written by Stan Lee, right? And the only thing that really changes is the artists. You have Don Heck on Iron Man, you got Kirby on Fantastic Four, and on everything else, Wally Wood on, or not, Bill, who's Daredevil? Bill Everett, right?
Bill Everett, yeah.
Very briefly, yeah.
So you can see the parallel. Stan Lee obviously throwing things to he can only write so much, I guess you could say. But it's very interesting. And then the other thing I really liked about learning the Marvel history in this way is that current comic book reading, we kind of think of Marvel's big trinity, especially in the movies, being Captain America, Iron Man, and Thor, right? Yeah. But when you look at their publication and who gets featured, it's really Thor, Iron Man, and Giant Man, or Ant-Man, because they're the ones who had a continuing series. Captain America doesn't show up until Avengers 4. Mm-hmm. Incredible Hulk only had 6 issues, and then he really becomes a guest star in a lot of books. Mm-hmm. But your Trinity, especially if you think of like the founders of the Avengers, the core founding members, and what was the other thing? Oh, when Hulk was guest starring in all these books, he showed up in Iron Man, he showed up in Giant Man, he showed up with Thor. I was like, oh, I don't know if it probably reads like that, but it certainly felt like that, like the big three. Because Hank Pym as Ant-Man was introduced before a lot of those characters were introduced. He was sort of their second or third headliner in the comics. So it's funny how he gets demoted along the way.
Yeah.
Yeah, I knew the Trinities, or the big ones, weren't Cap, Iron Man in the comics originally, but I don't know that I realized it was those 3.
Yeah. Very interesting. So I'm all in. I'm all in with early Marvel tapestry.
That's cool. It's like to revisit some of that stuff. And I guess from you saying the Marvel Saga, which obviously I haven't read since it came out, but it's a good way to go about it. I did try to do that with the Essentials because I was like, I had all those Essentials, and I was like, all right, I'm going to commit and like read all these, like the first 50 of each title or something like that. And I started with FF, and after the first Essential, I was like, I need a break because reading them together, like Thing being one of my favorite Fantastic Four character, like I was so sick of that character by the end of reading those, because he was always so angry. You know what I mean? It was always this dynamic in every issue. It was time after time. It was just regurgitated each, very very frequently. And I was just like, wow, I gotta break from this. It's like I'm tired. It's like I don't want to read it anymore. Mm-hmm. So obviously, reading it monthly, it's not so intense, right. But reading it issue after issue right in a row, it certainly tells a different story, so to speak.
Yeah.
So Peter, that would be. Go ahead.
Did you read X-Men Grand Designs by Ed Piskor?
No, and he also did one for Fantastic Four. Or no.
Oh no, that was what's his face? His buddy out in Pittsburgh.
Jim Rugg
did Jim Rugg did the Fantastic Four one, right? I don't think it was
and
Ed.
then somebody did a Hulk one too. Yeah. No, I had it and then I sold it before I even read it. But.
So good. Like he does a really amazing job of taking, all of X-Men history up until 2000 or ish or whatever, and distilling it down into 6 issues.
Right.
I mean, they're fat. They're like 48 page issues, and most of them are like 9 panel comics, right? So it's a lot of stuff in an issue, but is really well done, really captures the spirit, really smart comics. I can't speak highly enough of those. That was really brilliant stuff.
Yeah, I've heard good things about that. I haven't read it either.
Adam, have you seen that? Have you seen those? Yeah.
I have. I own them. I think I've nominated them for some best of awards in the past. As Bryan says, he just it's kind of a digest version of X-Men history, just to kind of filter through his own fanish lens. He decides for himself which stories deserve the most emphasis, and goes with that and puts it all in there. And it's like a idiosyncratic chronicle of X-Men history is filtered through the lens and the personality and the art style of Ed Piskor.
Yeah. I love stuff like that. I mean, like obviously, like so Marvel Saga, it can be a little dry, right? Because it's a lot of narration in between the panels. So it can be a little dry at times. And sometimes it's clearly promotional, like because it was coming out right at the time as like X Factor was coming out. So they constantly are like, here's the original 5 X-Men in their first appearance, and here they are as X Factor today, so they're clearly trying to do some promotional things. History of the DC Universe, obviously that's a big one. But in the recent years, the Mark Waid, Javier Rodriguez History of the Marvel Universe it's so good. It's so beautiful.
Rodriguez's colors in particular.
Oh, it's an amazing. It's just 6 issues. It's basically Mark Waid's version of History of the DC Universe, but it's not as prosy. I wish it did have a little more narrative stuff to it, but the artwork completely sells it. And then the other one that I haven't read that's over there on my shelf that I can't believe I haven't read yet is DC's The Other Side of the DC History of the DC Universe.
Right.
I have that
Ridley.
too. I didn't read it yet either.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to that. So that's taking a look at like secondary characters, characters of color, Black Lightning, Katana, Renee Montoya, but just flipping through it and how much. I should really get the artist on that. He recreates a lot of things that we know throughout DC Universe, like scenes from the Judas Contract or scenes from whatever. I could just read history books from the big 2 or any company that does it. Like I could just do that and just like give me, like that's what I think the new annuals or secret files should be. It should be a recap of your last 12 issues but put it in a fun story or fun context. I would totally buy those.
Right.
Now, would you extend that to things like the old indexes that used to come out?
Yeah, those were fun because they're pre-internet, right? And then you have all that information. Like I have, Adam, I'm sure you have the Crisis one, and
You bet.
I have the Titans one, Doom Patrol. There was a Justice League Hawkman Millennium, and sometimes they would have really good articles in the front, and then most of the rest of the stuff is just sort of reference material.
Yeah, I think I have the Crisis, the Millennium, and the Justice League ones.
Yeah,
I have all the Marvel ones that they did, those indexers that they did.
yeah,
and they were nice because they would give you a picture of the issue and then give you a synopsis. It would give you the, so that way you could get at least a general idea of what was going on each issue and the whole entire thing.
Little comments here and there about different things about characters. Marvel also did. They put out it was something called like the official reading chronology of the Marvel universe. Sometime in like the 1990s or 2000s, they put out this.
I think.
What's that?
2000s, I think.
Yeah, and again, it's sort of more reference material with cover images and things like that. But I love me some reference books.
Do you ever tackle the Tomorrow's chronology books, like the 80s, the 70s?
No, those were the one, and I can't remember if they ever sent some of those into CGS. When
they did.
They did, yeah.
They did.
I've always wanted to see them. I mean, I still get back issue. Get back issue.
I don't get it every single time, but if there's something that sounds good, I'll pick it up. I have the Starman one, and I'm dying to dive into that, and I just can't find the time to sit down and go cover to cover with it.
It's so much information.
Yeah.
So much information.
Yeah, it's a spectacular periodical.
Yeah. But they did one on recent, well, not recent, but in the past number of years, they did a whole book on DC Implosion, on the DC Implosion era.
Oh wow, I missed that.
That carries the pants seal approval.
Yeah.
Wow.
So good. And
kind of an oral history of like DC Comics behind the scenes in the late 70s.
Yeah.
Around the time of the ascension of Jeanette Kahn.
They're always having sales on their website too, like for digital, like they'll do crazy discounts.
Yeah.
And for print, I should say. I that is one of my biggest drawbacks is every time I see a really good reference book, I gotta buy it. And then when can you read them? They're so stacked with information.
Yeah. Oh my God. I've got Star Wars ones, Batman ones. I've got
Star Trek
books.
ones. You got Star Trek?
I do. Yeah. I've got the old Starfleet technical manual. I've got Next Generation one. I missed the Deep Space Nine one. That one for a while was really hard to find. And I somehow missed it because I would have loved to have read that too.
Did you get the chronology, Star Trek chronology?
Yeah, I had that at one time. I don't know if I still have that, but I do. I did pick it up.
And then they had an encyclopedia that was really thick. The chronology one was like, you wonder why I love trivia and all that kind of stuff. It's like you look at that chronology one, it was like, oh my God, they put it was up to what, like maybe season 2 or 3 of Deep Space Nine.
Yeah.
But they put all that information in chronological order.
Yep.
That you could read like a timeline of history.
Tied to everything, every show that referenced this or that. Yeah, it was really something. I have a Doctor Who technical manual from the 80s that I picked up at Walden Books and I lost through time. And just before the pandemic, I found it on eBay for a few bucks. So I picked it up and reread that. It's very thin. There's not a whole lot to it, but it was a neat little reference book for back in the 80s when there was not much Doctor Who stuff over here. That was a find at Walden Books one time.
Kevin, we always talk about that Frank Miller one, that reference. It was like the great artist file of Frank Miller or something like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. My God, when was that put out? That was after Ronin, right? Because Ronin was in that. They had that information, when
they had some Batman Dark Knight images in it too. So
I remember Ronin was prominent in that too. So they would do stuff like that. The other one that comes to mind is the X-Men Companion one that they had put out, which I'm wondering now. Like I haven't delved into that for a long time, and I'm wondering how in depth that is compared to the ones that we're bringing up now.
Right.
I'd have to revisit that to see how in depth that was. But
yeah.
It's neat that they do stuff like that. I think that's great because it keeps that material around, and it obviously like when they can, string it together so it feathers, in with the old any alterations to the older material where things have been folded in to not disturb the continuity but add to it. So it gives obviously a chance for, readers who are not going to be able to buy the old stuff and read all of it. So it's,
and with all the information on the internet, sometimes I find it convoluted, difficult to sift through what's better than what's like back when all of this reference stuff was coming out through the 80s and 90s and early 2000s, especially. This is where you went to get it. It was ordered the book and you read it and that was it. Now everybody has websites and I'm sure there's a lot of good information on a lot of them, but to sift through it all to make something coherent, there's just something special about some of those reference books that you just can't grasp always on the internet in the same way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Plus it's also... Go ahead, Bryan.
Well, I was just going to say, do you think that newer comic readers, do you think they give a crap about the history of this stuff? And I don't mean that like, these, whippersnappers don't care. I just mean like, does it even matter? Like, I'm sure there's a percentage of new comic nerds who want to dive in because nerds, that's what nerds do, right?
Sure.
But also like, there's probably a lot of people who just like, I just want to read the new stuff and I enjoy it. And I don't really want to know about Fantastic Four 60 years ago or whatever. Right. Like,
I think there's probably a really good portion of that because of the way the world's set up today with a lot of instant gratification, just because of the internet. Yeah. It's probably irrelevant to a majority of people compared to what our generation, God, sound like an old man, our generation would have been back in the 80s and 90s reading these books and trying to find the history of this stuff. Things have been rebooted so many times and everybody has such quick access and short attention spans. Yeah, they probably don't care as much. And if they do, it's going to be on a summary page somewhere.
Yeah, I feel like the definitely in the 80s, right, the comics that came out, they themselves reference the history. They would be like, see Fantastic Four number 128 or whatever. And now it's like nobody, like they don't really do that anymore because it's just like it's about the now. It's not about the then, right? They'd almost prefer if you didn't even know that there was a history, so then they can do whatever the hell they want.
And once in a while when you get it, it's kind of special. I know I've read recent books where they do that.
Of course. Asterisk footnotes have not gone the way of the dodo just yet because they can still help the publishers to sell other comics. You want to understand more context for what happened in this panel? Well, check out this other comic that we can sell you. It's even in a trade collection.
But usually it's very recent comics, right? Like it might be like this happened 4 issues ago, or this is happening in another comic this month that you can buy it off the rack right now, as opposed to one that came out 20 years ago. Maybe go dig in the back issues, right? Because that doesn't help them sell anything, right?
It could help them sell trades, potentially.
Trades, that's what I was thinking.
Possibly, yeah.
I think there's a market for whatever they're called, masterworks, whatever the new essential is, whatever the compendiums, whatever DC. I think there's
Epic collections.
Right. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. And those are for probably also older hardcore collectors and things like that. I thought, Bryan, you were going to talk. I thought you meant some of the backstory stuff too, because I know on YouTube.
I do.
Oh, yeah. On YouTube, there are channels where, every time Marvel drops a new actor that is going to be a new character within the Marvel Universe, suddenly there's hundreds of those YouTube channel videos that everything you needed to know about Namor, everything you need to know about, Ironheart, everything you need to know about Moon Knight. And
we got a half-second glimpse of MODOK in the latest Quantumania trailer, and then there's YouTube videos saying, well, MODOK, who is MODOK?
Right. Yeah. And these videos get hundreds of thousands of views, some of them, the ones that are like the top tier.
Yeah.
And, so they're getting the information, but they're obviously getting it filtered through that YouTuber's particular entertainment style. It's not necessarily, I'm not saying that the information they give is wrong. It's just, it's sort of digestible. It's quick. It's flashy. It's, even if the video is 45 minutes long, you're getting something filtered through somebody's perspective. But at least in that regard, that part of it still kind of rolls along.
Well, I mean, Marvel has implemented that, especially with the MCU, that when there is an attention towards other characters, they put out the facsimile editions, which are just reprints of a specific issue that is pertinent to this, like the new solicits came out today, and And obviously, with Adam Warlock coming into the Guardians of the Galaxy, now there's an Adam Warlock facsimile edition. I think it's the Strange Tales 178. So
Right.
it's like, oh, so I can go grab that today. Which is just a reprint of that comic from the 70s, and so a new reader can pick that up and read it. And find out and get more information about this character. Who is this character?
Yeah.
You talk about facsimile editions, and I have picked up the Brave and the Bold Justice League one that came out recently, and there was one other, I forget which one it was, that I picked up, maybe a Crisis one. It was probably the first Batman Detective Comics, and to hold it, even if it was just holding it in the store, and to look at those first like 8 pages that are specific to Batman, and everything else is whatever stories are in there, and I stare at and marvel about how much people pay for an original copy, like. And it's just for these 8 pages. Like, I can't always wrap my brain around that. You're just buying the 8 pages for Batman, nothing else.
Yeah.
Well, it's crazy too, right? When you think about it, is like when I started reading comics in earnest, it was about 1985 or 1986, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's like since 1962. We weren't even at 25 years of like Spider-Man history or Avengers history or whatever, right? And now you got to add almost 40 to that. And so if you're getting into comics now, you have so much more information and stories and plot lines and retcons and all that stuff that you have to learn if you want to know. Whereas we had very little, and like there weren't nearly as many titles and stuff. It was like most of these issues, like it was like there was 23 years of Avengers at 12 issues a year. It's like, do the math, it's like not that many Avengers stories, right? And it's like, oh my god, now there's 87 titles and all these things, and like, so it's a much bigger task to try to know the history. It's much more intimidating, I feel like.
I'd agree with that.
Especially if you want to get it firsthand knowledge. Like if you,
right.
I think we talked about this before, maybe some of the earlier episodes that we did, like me going through Claremont, Cockrum, X-Men from Giant Size. And right now I just read the first appearance of Alpha Flight. The first appearance of Weapon Alpha. Mm-hmm. Which is only like the second John Byrne issue or something like that.
Yeah, what am I?
Yeah. And then, but what I'm also doing is factoring in other X-Men appearances across the Marvel Universe. So you're starting to see them interact with Spider-Man or Iron Fist. And then to read that last issue of Iron Fist, which features the X-Men, mm-hmm. There's a story plot in there that doesn't get resolved because it's the final issue that gets picked up later in Marvel Team Up, because Claremont and Byrne had a lengthy run on Marvel Team Up, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And then that's where you get this wrap up of this Iron Fist story. You get the Daughters of the Dragon, and reading it as opposed to hearing people talk about it or reading a Wikipedia article. It's so pure of an experience, because there are many things that people have said about the X-Men prior to when Byrne joined or even during Byrne's run. And yet when you read it, you realize like there's what becomes lore is sometimes not as, for lack of a better word, true as when you read it yourself. Like sometimes it's like whisper down the lane. Some stories get a little, and I'm trying to think of some of the things like, why does nobody ever mention that? At least I don't hear it, but like Colossus totally had a crush on Storm before Byrne got on the book, what was he? There's a couple other things too that were like major revelations in that early or just the simple fact that Cockrum really defined a lot of the X-Men language before Byrne even got there. Mm-hmm. And yet Byrne is held as, and rightfully so. I'm not arguing that point.
Yeah.
Just that the Claremont Byrne run on Marvel Team Up feels like it's also should be like a major part of 70s history, because it's Spider-Man meeting Danny Rand for the first time and meeting Iron Fist for the first time. And that goes to your point, Brian, about, if you go backwards, you don't have to go back too far if you're trying to establish Marvel continuity. And it's like, wow, how much of these characters existed in little silos, meeting occasionally, but then when you get to the 70s and now you got Roy Thomas and Marv Wolfman and all the fans of what Stan Lee wrote, now they're starting to weave that tapestry even tighter, and characters are meeting and having bits of their origin meshed together. And so let me put this caveat: when the books are good or interesting, that makes it a lot of fun. Even if they are wordy, the 70s, the artwork is usually always beautiful. Another one was like the development of the Defenders, right? Like Defenders 1, there is so much more content before Defenders before Marvel Premiere, before Defenders 1. There's stories in Doctor Strange. They call them the Titanic 3 or something like that. Like there's like all this other stuff before you even get to Defenders.
Yeah.
So I do enjoy that. And I'm still very raw when it comes to early Marvel history from 60s and 70s that I'm enjoying that quite a lot. I'm enjoying my own firsthand experience with it.
That's why I'm glad that the way they've, with these epic collections that Marvel's put out, is that they've started including that. Like if they, in the Masterworks, it was just, like 10 issues each volume, and maybe an annual. Whereas now the epic collections are those Masterworks, but then they also weave in issues that happen to tie into that character and that history or whatever it is, so they're giving you these other appearances and other titles,
right,
in the same book, as well as a run of that title,
right,
and I think that's great. I love that. I think that was a smart move. We've
been talking about that for years. Like we always say, like they should hire Adam to just, here's your blueprint, or any of us.
Yeah.
Like, here's the blueprint. Don't just cut these stories out because you're like, man, nobody wants to read them. It's like, no, they're important.
That's what I loved about the Starman compendiums. Those 6 volumes, they encompass everything for Jack Knight Starman. All the crossovers, all the appearances, any tie-in like Power Shazam and all, it's all there where it's supposed to be. It was a well done collection.
That's champion. I'll say this real quick, Brian. Adam and I discovered a Lost Crisis tie-in that they do not include in all of the any compendium, and it's there. It's a Crisis Monitor appearance or something like that. Yeah,
it was a Monitor appearance.
Yeah, it's like consult us. You got a missing chapter there, punks.
Yeah.
Sorry, Brian.
Well, what I was going to say is these, collections that have tie-in issues and all that stuff, it's so easy to do digitally, right? Like if you have an account to Marvel Unlimited, and if they have those comics in the system, it would be very easy for them to essentially like create a playlist of, this is the first 2 years of the Avengers in chronological order, including any appearances that they made in other things or whatever, and they can just put as many collections together as they want because it's not additional content. They're just linking it in different ways.
A Spotify for comics.
Yeah.
Oh, shit, I just gave that idea away. That would be amazing.
You need Marvel or DC to hire you to put together these collections, and you can curate,
That would be hot.
Yeah, right? There's no reason it can't happen.
Years ago, before Disney bought Star Wars, there was a curator of Star Wars timeline, and his job was just any submission for books, comics, whatever, was to make sure it fit into the universe right, or to give background of where it could fit in.
Right. He had the best job in all of Star Wars. Right? It was, what was his name?
Oh, I don't remember that.
Doug Chang or something like that. But yeah, like, and then of course when Marvel bought Disney and said you kicking it out, then it was like, he just went womp. Like his whole life was just like, it doesn't matter.
Right. Yeah.
Doug Chiang.
Yeah, I got it right. Look at that. I remembered something. Holy shit. I knew that, and Shane didn't know.
No, I didn't know his name at all.
By the way, while we're throwing names out, Giuseppe Camuncoli is the artist on Other History of the DC Universe. Conversation from 15 minutes, 20 minutes ago.
But Peter, to go back to that the playlist thing, right? Like it may not exist, but there's nothing stopping you from making like a blog that says these comics are currently available on Marvel Unlimited. This is the order that you should read these 20 issues if you want to know the story about blah blah blah, right? Yeah. And the same thing with DC. And then it's just like, if they want to read them, they can just go through one by one and read them.
Right. To be fair, there are plenty of reading guides online already. Most of them, the only thing I don't like about most of them, some of them, is they do it by collections. So they'll say, if you want a Spider-Man reading guide, you got to get Essential number 1, Essential number 2, Masterworks number 4. You know what I mean? They do it by what is already printed. But then there are obviously websites that do exactly what we just said, especially with like Legion. There's a ton of Legion of superhero websites where they're like, all right, if you want to read Legion in publishing order, here you go. Yeah. The ones that I sort of don't agree with is when they do it by story continuity, not by publication continuity, which has its own value. If you want to read, take for instance, Daredevil, well, you got to read, Daredevil Man Without Fear and Daredevil number 1. You got to read, it's almost like doing what Marvel Saga did. I tend to favor the publication order because that's the truest sort of development of a character but there, like I said, there are a lot of them already out there blog wise, but just the idea of like you could go on DC's website and hit Nightwing.
Yeah. And they have a certain collections function, but it's not quite that.
I don't think they're shareable and stuff. What I was suggesting, Peter, was that if you wanted to, not that you don't have any other projects on your plate or anything, but like you could make a curated list of only comics that are currently available on these subscription services. Right, so like, hey, you're a DC, whatever it's called, subscriber. If you want to read about Nightwing, I recommend these 15 comics in this order.
Yeah.
Go read them because they're all there. Because sometimes you get this, here's the list to read, and you're like, well, I don't own those. And like, well, that one is in, I have to buy the back issue. I don't want to. Or this is only available in this hardcover collection of, and it's like, I'm not spending $100 so I can read one issue. Like that's what's a pain about those sometimes.
Yeah. And they have
by the way, X-Men Grand Designs is on Marvel Unlimited. So anybody who wants to read it.
Nice.
And it was Tom Scioli did Fantastic Four, and Jim Rugg did Hulk.
That's right.
Bryan, let me ask you, do you have, and I have this problem, I talked about it yesterday with Adam and the other guys, on your Marvel app, do you view stuff offline, downloaded, ever?
I've never done that, no.
I was trying to do it for the trip, and every time I disconnected, I had the stuff downloaded. Like, I downloaded it one day and tried to read it the next day. And I would try to open that app up, and it would not open up those books to save my life. I'd have to connect to the internet, and boom, they would pop right up. And I'm like, it's downloaded. That's the whole point.
Yeah, that beats the purpose.
Frustrating.
I don't know. I couldn't even get my iPad is getting old, and it won't even log in. But then I went to the website using the same password. It logged right in, so I don't even know what's going on right now. I'm gonna have to break down and buy a new iPad.
I was making sure I had the most recent app updates and iOS, and everything's fine, and it just won't work.
Speaking of app kerfuffles, did you see that Comixology laid off almost their entire staff?
Yeah, I was going to mention that. It seems like they're gearing to have Amazon absorb the whole thing, and it's going to be all Kindle based, I guess.
Yeah.
One of my friend Pat Loika was one of the casualties. I just saw it on Facebook today.
Oh, I was wondering about that. I knew he was
like he was like a product manager or something for them, and an employee, one of the guys on my team, an iOS developer at a previous job, he left my team to go work for Amazon, make a shit ton of money, and he was on the Comixology team. And I just texted him yesterday, and he's like, "Yep, it's my last day. You hiring?"
Oh.
I was like, "Damn it, I wish I was," because I tried to get him to work for me before. But yeah,
wow,
I don't know about that.
It always, we talked about that Comixology thing before. It's always get worried when somebody gets absorbed by somebody else.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Adam, how's your collection? Like, you still have your, you still buy, because you're all, whatever the word is. Analog?
He's still got his time bubble.
Yeah. I just mean in general, like, storage and how are you handling all that?
I basically live among a giant heap of comic books at all times. Just ballooning, just like spreading like lichen all over every surface in my apartment. Somehow I remember what order to read them in. I don't know how, but it's just kind of become an instinct at this point.
Do you bag and board or any of it?
Hell
that?
No.
Oh, no.
No time for that. Wouldn't be able to fit them all into the box. I mean, I can't fit them into the boxes as it is, but if each comic were like 30% wider thanks to the backing board and the Mylar, it would just make it that much harder. So,
yeah.
Yep. I just kind of throw them in there naked and say good luck.
Wow. Like, what are your plans? I mean, other than just reading it like you have been doing, like where do you envision that collection going someday?
No, you're talking estate planning now, huh?
Or
we all need to be thinking in those terms, I guess. But
his comics should generate enough money to pay for the dumpster to get rid of them all when the estate planning time comes. Right?
I don't know if I could even do that. But yeah, I haven't thought that far ahead. I mean, Pants, to his credit, actually has been thinking in terms. He's probably gone on record as such here on this podcast. But yeah, I don't know. Well, like you, Peter, I refuse to die until I have read every comic book I own. So it'll be a moot point for a while.
Okay.
I've got the kids very, very comedically coming through the room every now and then and talking about something like, can I have that when you die?
Oh,
yeah.
They stage arguments among themselves as to who's
like they might as well
what.
have Post-it notes and putting it on stuff with different colors.
hard to state claims.
Did you see that there's like a fight at your funeral? Like, that facsimile Detective Comics issue because they think it's the real thing, and they're like,
right. Guys, you see that little thing there? It's $3.99. Yeah, that's not from the 30s.
Well, we had a listener write in. He emailed me. He's somewhere in the Philly area, Bob Kelly. And when we were talking about that flea market thing that we should do at Golden Eagle, he was like, I would totally be down for the Golden Eagle thing if you guys ever did it. He said, maybe I'm speaking from the privileged position of proximity, but I would bet more than 20 people would show up for something like that. So I meant to read that. I was in the hospital the last time, so I meant to read that then, but I didn't have any of my notes, but I wanted you guys to know that. So there you go, Adam. If you ever want to sell some of the stuff you've already read, we need to look into that.
They got boxes underneath one table here for that.
Spring cleaning sale, CGS style.
Shane, speaking of, having stuff, and someday you'll want to get rid of stuff and your plethora of toys and all the toys that I've already gotten rid of. I was in Target the other day and I just decided to walk down the toy aisle, which I haven't done in years and years and years. And I saw the new G.I. Joe toys, right? Now I know that they're, what are these 6-inch figures and not 3 3/4-inch figures, but it was like one G.I. Joe guy was $23. And I was like, holy shit, that's I mean, my God, I'm not buying any toys. Forget that. Like, that's so much.
There's an extremely narrow set of Star Wars stuff that I still keep my eye on. And it has mostly to do with like this year, it'll be Return of the Jedi's 40th anniversary. So like I focus on certain things like that. G.I. Joe stuff, since I kind of gave up on everything else, that's my focus. I don't buy many comics anymore because I subscribe to the apps. So what money I would have gotten comics with, I kind of use for the G.I. Joe stuff. There's a guy that I met through one of the G.I. Joe forums I'm on. He's in Denmark, and I help him get stuff because they can't get it over there. So I'll buy it, he'll pay me, and I ship it over to him. Just part of the community in that forum. So I kind of get a kick out of being able to buy more than what I should for GI Joe, but I sell it to him, and it doesn't cost me anything. It's just fun to go shop. So I get what I want, and then I search for him too.
Well, if they ever release a 6-inch Rakondo, let me know, because is it?
So this is a
bitch.
This is a Tiger Force Rakondo, but there is a regular version coming.
Because I have the only GI Joe guy that I kept. I gave all of my stuff to Sean Pryor. When we moved, I just put it in a box and shipped it to him. No, I just was like, I don't want to try to sell all this stuff. You love GI Joe, just take it all, right? So he has my whole collection.
Wow.
But I kept Rakondo.
Yeah.
And it's sitting,
just came out. It's a Target exclusive. You can easily get it, but there is a regular, more traditional deco coming down the pike this year.
That's what I would want. Well, let me know when it comes out. Maybe I'll get one, or,
when I was at Target before Christmas, the Marvel Legends section had a new, fairly nice looking Speedball figure. And I thought, I wonder if Bryan would want that. It was full body, none of that weird ones that were out a few years ago. But I let it pass.
Yeah, I had it in my hands. I thought about it. I was like, I don't need it. I don't need it.
Shane, you're running supply lines. Are you on like a CIA watch list?
If only. Yeah, if only.
He is now.
if they're watching me for GI Joe supply lines for one guy in Denmark, one of each figure,
you're gonna get popped. They're gonna be knocking at your door for illegal freaking trade, U.S. international trade. Not going through the proper channels.
Yeah, that's a sad state of affairs if that happens.
Sean Pryor just got married, by the way.
I saw that.
Yeah, he did.
Yeah. Last week.
Crazy man.
I still have up here somewhere. Maybe it's right kind of there. There's an Empire Strikes Back mini rig that he gifted me one time when he came up here. Still in the little box. He's like, you kind of like this stuff just as much as I do here. I'm like, oh my God, something original of Star Wars. My God. I'd still like to put together, and I have the elevator shaft and I have one deck to it. I'd still like to put together an old Death Star playset and put the 40 or so Star Wars figures I have left on it.
Wow.
Just
my original collection.
Shane, now that you can get the resin 3D printers are like amazing. They do super high quality stuff. I gotta imagine that there's somebody out there modeling all these old toys, and then you could print them yourself. And I mean, they're all one color. You'd have to paint them if you wanted things. But if you were like missing a part, I guarantee somebody you could print that exact part to fit right in and complete your thing. Yeah. My buddy, one of the guys, the guy who does Chewbacca in the 501st, right? He was at Super Show and stuff. He has a gigantic 3D printer. It's not resin, it's the regular plastic one. So the fidelity is a little lower, but he is printing, Shane, life-size replicas of the original Star Wars 3 3/4 figures.
Oh my God.
So he prints them in these like huge chunks and then glues them together so that he has them in his like prop room, like 3 or 4 of these like full size figures. It's insane. I'm gonna have to try to find a picture and send it to you.
Yeah, the only one I would need is R2D2. That's still my jam. He has an actual. He built an R2 unit that remote control and all that stuff, right? So he already has that. So he wanted to, Yeah, but one of the when we were on our trip, there's so many things that you can buy down at Disney. Of course, it's way overpriced for the most part. But in the Star Wars land, there's this little flea market-y section, and inside are different knickknacks. And surprisingly enough, compared to other things you could get at Disney, they really weren't that expensive. I did buy a kind of like wood toy R2D2 and C3PO just because I have such an affinity and such a collection of R2D2 figures that I kind of thought that was worth it. But yeah, R2D2, I can still remember the Kmart in Pottstown that I picked up the first R2D2 in 1978 right off the end cap. That was the first figure I bought. And my mom's like, "Don't you want Luke or Han?" I'm like, "No, R2D2. I want the droid."
I hear stories about that, about, that guy making those life-size toys, or the people who design and make life-size replicas of like the original Enterprise bridge and garage and things like that. And I'm like, my geek card is nowhere near.
No, there's the one guy up in New York that did the Enterprise bridge. Now he's got the whole, and you can go visit it as a tourist attraction. It's the whole layout of the CBS studio. So how the bridge was in relation to the transporter room and the medical bay. He got a hold of the blueprints from the construction at CBS or Desilu, and he built his storefront to be that.
Wow.
And I've watched videos of touring through it. It's amazing.
Jesus.
All the lights light up, all the sounds. It's amazing.
There you go, Kevin. There's your new business. Recreate sets.
Recreate sets. Yeah.
Well, what's I totally I feel that urge all the time, right? Like I'm choosing to direct that energy into I'm doing some of the medieval reenactment stuff because that was real, right? Like that's an actual thing that exists. So I'm weaving the way the Vikings wove things, or so it's like I could be using all of that same energy into building, replicas of the Millennium Falcon tunnel or whatever, in my basement or something. But so I get it. I totally I look at those people and go, yeah, I would, in another life, I would do that if I had a bigger house or what, 100%, I completely empathize with those people and know that creative impulse, 100%.
With all that leather work, you should just start making pouches. Every Liefeld pouch.
God, you could be busy for years on Cyclops alone.
Yeah, right.
I would go broke. The leather's expensive, man. What the heck are you gonna?
I'll have to commission you for a Ben Affleck Daredevil costume.
Oh, there you go.
I've finished my bag for this is my project bag for carrying stuff around, when I go to our weekly meetups for the medieval nerds to work on projects together. So
nice.
All leather, real sturdy.
Nice.
What's that character's name in Daredevil? Gambini, or what the costume maker?
Or are you thinking of the Flash?
Oh, that's the Flash. Who's the one?
Flash.
Yeah, Peter Gamby, and I think Peter Gamby is the tailor who was the friend of Black Lightning, and then his brother Paul is the one who made the costumes for all the rogues.
Right. Who's the one in the Daredevil Netflix show that made Daredevil's costume?
Well, that's Melvin Potter.
Melvin Potter, right? The Gladiator.
There you go. That's right. That's what Bryan can be.
Yeah.
Start making costumes. Oh, I smell a Crusaders 3. New costumes.
Redesigns, for the new action figure line.
The scavenger stalks again.
Oh, God.
Love it.
Oh, I went and watched those again because, Kevin, you said they were on your website. So I was like, let me watch them again. And totally forgot that I was a thug in some of the earlier issues, get my ass kicked by some of you, and there was one sequence where Dr. Devious was sitting down and the camera had to go around him, and then the Crusaders. I was the one that was taking the camera. Around. Yeah, it was all shaking. I totally forgot how much more involved, all of us really were, and all that.
Oh my God,
hysterical.
We all wore a lot of hats.
Well, and you were the lawyer then too, because when we were doing
once we did the character stuff, but I mean, or the other favorite one I have too is Mike played a thug a lot as well, and there's one where Paperboy totally covers a car and Mike has to put his head through. I was the one who threw the newspaper that got him right in the head.
Hit in the head.
First take, square in the head. I was like, yeah.
Well, yeah, because that was part of the thing. Make sure you have your thug gear, because everybody had a set of thug gear. So in case you needed to fill in, you had to fill in.
Had to get beat up.
Yeah, I haven't rewatched them in a while, but
funny.
might be something to do.
So, did you go to Shin Ultraman, Kevin?
I did. I absolutely did. And I'm glad I saw it because I had been watching this, on Twitter and stuff to see, like, I saw that they were, that when they announced that they were doing a full movie, and I was very intrigued. So I was like, well, and then I saw that it was only going to be released in Japan, and I thought, well, eventually it has to come to the United States in some way, shape, or form, whether it's going to be on a streaming service or something. But
Yeah.
just lo and behold, I happened to look at something, and they were like, oh, Fathom Events, who, like we went 5 years ago to watch Superman, the movie, and because that was a 40th anniversary. And so they did, they had it. It was only 2 days in the United States. It was last week in January. So it was only Wednesday and Thursday. It was the only 2 days you could go see it. And Wednesday was the subtitled, and Thursday was a dubbed.
Oh, wow.
So you had that choice going on. But it was interesting because I went into the theater, and I already had my ticket, and there was an older gentleman taking tickets, and he looked at my ticket, and he's like, "Oh, the anime thing," and I was like, "Yeah, kind of, And he's like, "Hey, I've heard really good things about that," I was like, "Oh, that was encouraging." I was like, here's that kind of feedback for something that's only going to be in the theater for 2 days, and apparently it's making a splash. So apparently, from what I read, they the first day they made over $400,000 in box office sales, and it was very limited release in the United States. So a lot of people were interested, but I watched it and I thoroughly enjoyed it. I mean, it wasn't great, but I was going into it as I have with other projects, and just like low expectation, and let's just see what they do. And everything that I saw, they were, it is the original Ultraman from 1966. It's basically a 2-hour movie almost, with telling the story, which the original series of 39 episodes. And so it's not everything, but they do encompass that whole series, from the start of the movie to the end of the movie. You see things from each episodes, and it's a different science patrol, but it's still the SSSP Science Patrol, just different members, different names. But the origin is fairly the same, which they didn't delve a lot of time on that. That was something that was kind of brought into later on, that you kind of saw it and they just touched upon it, and that's it. So they didn't, delve on that. They focused on, trying to make a good movie of Ultraman, which, I thought was a great idea. I mean, dear Lord, it's taken this long. I mean, I know they've had offshoots and all that stuff, that they've had for all this time through Japan and such, with all the offshoot Ultramen, and so there are movies with Tiga and Dinah and all those, but for the original, obviously there's a nostalgia. I mean, that's me. I used to watch that in the afternoons with the whole lineup of Marine Boy and Speed Racer and Spider-Man and Ultraman, so that's something that, for me, it was a tangent point. So I was very enthused to watch it. And of course, there's no rubber suits, so it's, so it's the real deal. It's the full, CGI, characters. And it was great to see him take it seriously and to try to create something in this medium for new audiences to be able to also, respect and draw in the older fans as well. And I thought they did a very, very good job. It was a very decent story, encapsulated, some of the villains that were, in the original episodes. That was the whole underlying theme of these plot lines. They put a lot of effort into it. It was because apparently the same team that did the Shin Ultraman also did a Shin Godzilla.
Oh, wow.
A couple of years ago. So, and Shin translated to English is new. So that's the point of it all, is that they're reapproaching, and trying to do a very respectful reinterpretation of the original material. That's the approach of going about it. So,
did you watch that Netflix animation?
Yeah.
How was that? Because I tried to watch the first episode, but
it's good. I watched both seasons, and it takes place after. Basically, the main character is Hayata's son. So it's not trying to be Ultraman, and he's not, a 60-meter giant. It's more of he still has basically the premise of that is he from being a descendant of Hayata and his meld with Ultraman that he has developed kind of powers in a way. So he has something innate within inside him, and then also obviously translate into having, it's basically a suit, but he has abilities as well. So it's an extension upon that, kind of in a new approach for that. But the effects were great. I thought, the story, they had a lot of Easter eggs in it. I mean, I thought of you, Shane, like when in one scene, like they're showing the science patrol, and of course they're, addressing what's going on, and there in the corner of the frame is the Enterprise hanging there. So, and the music, nice. They brought in the music from the original series, they used that. So when you heard, like the science patrol would come on, you hear that, dun, 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 and they used a lot of geek Easter eggs in it, and also, tied things in with even the music and
nice.
And the story, basically they just took the 39 episodes and used that as a base plot and then built off of that.
That's cool.
But, they made some variations and such, but it was really cool to see, watch Ultraman and, CGI and, not in a rubber suit and, and have a whole 2-hour story of it, so.
Plus on a big screen as well.
Oh my God. Yeah. I never imagined that I would have that kind of experience and opportunity to see something like that. So I was grateful. I was grateful to catch that and be able to enjoy that. They started out, in the beginning of the movies nowadays, I mean, not only do you have all the advertisements and, they do little games you can hook to your phone, and play and some trivia, and then they'll show you 38 previews and, it's like 20-minute experience. Well, in this one, because of being a direct, a direct transition from Japan, that they had a trivia game in the front. It was an Ultraman trivia game that you could, I don't know how many questions, I forget how many questions there were. Of course I bombed, but I mean, because they went through the whole thing, which I don't know the whole universe. I don't know all these. I haven't watched Ultraman over the past 50 years. I didn't watch all the different versions and the whole universe of that kind of stuff. So I don't know all that stuff, but I did get some questions right. But
yeah, that's cool.
Cool.
Yeah, I'm sure I would imagine it has to be out and available some point, sometime.
Right.
To be able to access it, whether it be, like Vudu or, something. I did before I went to go see it. I kind of was getting myself jazzed up. So I went on Tubi and watched all of the original series, all 39 episodes, which,
wow.
I mean, it was like 2 weeks, I did that all. And they're like 20 minutes an episode, but, I was surprised that the Tubi version, they had no English language one. So it was all subtitled. So I had to watch, so I'm watching all those original episodes again, but they're all subtitled. So anyway, it was good. I highly recommend at least checking it out. It's, not a blockbuster, but it's certainly an enjoyable film and has a nostalgic feel, but also has the great energy of a new movie as well.
That's awesome.
So.
We are living in nothing but nostalgia these days.
Yeah.
And it's a good thing because reality sucks.
Yeah. And there's a lot of YouTube channels, different things that I see that kind of poo-poo on that, and I just don't understand it. I mean, if you don't like it, fine. If it's not your bag and you don't like the nostalgia part of it, fine. Then just don't do it. Don't watch it. But I love the nostalgia stuff that's coming out to a certain extent. Especially right now, like there's recreations of old Kenner action figures. So if there's really one that I want to get that I can't find because I'm not going to pay $150 for a beat up one, I can buy this new one for $15. I'll do it. If there's a show that I want to watch, I know it's silly, but that 90s show just came on Netflix today. I watched the first episode at dinner and it was funny. I was laughing. I might not watch the whole thing. I might not like the whole thing, even if I do watch it, but it was fun to watch that first episode and get a kick out of what they were doing.
Yeah. Look at that. All those years we poke fun at Adam for, loving that 70s culture or whatever. And we're we're all jonesing to be 4, 5, 6 again.
Yeah.
How about that? I was ahead of the trend.
Speaking of nostalgia, did you see the last week the New York Times published a really cool piece about the 1970 something Dune movie that was never made by Jodorowsky, and it had like still screenshots from it?
No.
And now I know it's very controversial these days, but it's all AI generated art. So they took this legendary creative mind and made AI 1970 style Tron. I mean, it is like you can't look at these screenshots and not say, I want to see that movie. Like somebody needs to go and make this movie now that looks like that.
Wow.
If you just, Google it, Jodorowsky Tron AI, and the images are, you can't read the articles behind the New York Times paywall, but all the images are all over the internet now. And that's all you really need to look at. And it is so convincing. Like you don't know how that's not an actual screen capture from a movie that was made. It's stunning, so stylized and cool.
They did that documentary too for the Jodorowsky Dune. There's some documentary on Netflix or
this
something.
Is Tron, not Dune.
Oh, Tron. Okay. I got
this is a
confused in the
fictional
story.
thing.
Sorry.
He didn't make Tron. There is no
As
1976. It's as if he made it, and then you look at this and go, "My God, I want to watch this movie right now."
I got lost in the story. My bad.
Yeah, it's really, really an interesting idea. None of it's real. It's just completely fabricated, but my God, it's beautiful.
Could you imagine putting today's sensibilities and creating like 70s reimagined Star Wars or somebody else under like a new director, or go back and do a Clint Eastwood movie in the style of Quentin Tarantino? That could be
exactly. Right?
That could be fun. It could be fun.
I mean, Hollywood has no other ideas, so like, why not? Right?
Yeah, sure.
I'll do a search. I did a quick search and it came up with the whole New York Times thing, but the images are flipping in the background and it's pretty phenomenal.
Right?
Wow.
It's beautiful stuff.
Like, is anybody super hyped for The Last of Us? Is that a thing for any of us?
I mean, I'm curious to why. I never played the game.
No, I never played the game.
I'm curious to watch the show. We were going to watch it the other night, but Tasha was like, look, we have like 6 shows that we're in the middle of. We need to finish something before we start a new one. So we'll wait, And they're only releasing one a week, so it won't take long.
For me, it's more about watching Pedro Pascal. I mean, I like him in almost anything I've seen him in.
Right.
Except for Wonder Woman 1984, but that's a whole nother thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm curious just to watch it because it looks like an interesting show. I did not know it was a video game until I listened kind of to the trailer part of it. But it just looked like a neat new show to watch.
Wonder if that's a generational thing, that it just missed us or just
maybe.
I mean, the game came out for PlayStation 4, I think. So it's not that long ago that it came out.
Oh, okay.
I mean, there was The Last of Us 2, so it was long enough that there's 2 in the game. But they just re-released like a super PS5-ized edition, like where they recreated the first game, like scene for scene. Everything is like exactly the same, just with beautiful graphics on the PS5. But then, because they rebuilt the entire game, it cost $60 like a brand new game would.
Oh yeah.
Because I was like, oh, maybe I'll play that. That would be cool. And then I was like, not for 60. Like,
that's
and
weird,
like I have
because,
PlayStation Plus, and they give you the original version for free. It's like I could just play the PS4 version for free versus pay $60 for the new version. Like,
I really try to wait until a video game hits like $29.99 before I consider buying it, or less.
Yeah. Ideally, I want to pay $9.99.
Yeah.
That's really my threshold.
They've been doing that with the Resident Evil series, and exact same thing, exact same premise, all same game, but just completely updated graphics, and it looks phenomenal. And I think the most expensive one I've seen of those is like $35. So it's kind of weird that Last of Us came out 2014, I think. So it's been out for 9 years. So, but yeah, that's kind of, I'm surprised that they're charging $60 for that. But I guess, again, there's only 2 games of it, whereas Resident Evil, they have 7 or 8 of those. So I mean,
34
for them, yeah. So they can obviously, it's a franchise, so they can, I guess, maybe charge a little bit less for it. I picked up 2 and 3 Resident Evil. They had a sale, PlayStation always running sales, and especially at the holidays, they ran a holiday sale, and you can get games like 75% off. So I got they had a bundle, Resident Evil 2 and Resident Evil 3 reimagined for, I think, $15. So
nice.
well, that's worth it.
Yeah.
But it's nice that they do it. I was hoping they would do a little bit more to it than just the graphics. I mean, the graphics are great, but I was hoping that they would kind of smooth out the controls better, make it less clunky, maybe a little more smooth. But I guess obviously that goes into a whole realm of programming and stuff like that, so it takes a lot more investment, I'm sure. But.
So did we read Thor?
We did.
I did not.
Yeah.
You did not? All right, you can listen right?
I was away.
That's all right.
No excuse.
No. So we started, so this all started because in one of our early episodes, Bryan and I, we decided to finish the Simonson Surtur saga, which was only like 6 issues at the time, because we originally, it was mostly Bryan, me, Shane, Jamie. We were doing footnotes of the Simonson run issue by issue. And then Bryan and I were like, let's just read and talk, it's a monumental run. Let's just, talk about it. So we got up to 353. So for this episode, we've read 354 up to 359, which is continuing the Simonson, and we should say Simonson and John Workman and Christy Steele. It was definitely a creative team.
Mm-hmm.
We did have one fill-in issue in this 6 issue.
Yes. Yeah. Two fill-in issues, actually, art-wise, if you think. Sal Buscema did the second issue. Yeah, and then a total fill-in issue in that 356, I guess it was.
Yeah, Hercules, yeah.
Yeah, and we're not going to go footnote style. We just said, let's do it. Let's have something that we all can read and talk about again, and just talk casually. And what did you got? Let's give a little bit of a background to it. So these 6 issues, number one, they kind of wrap up some loose things from the previous story. So like Lorelei was trying to, she bewitched Thor, and we finally see the outcome of that. Mm-hmm. All of the Asgardians, after their battle with Surtur, were trapped on Earth, and we had to deal with that, like them roaming around New York City.
Yeah, which is kind of odd.
Yeah. And how are they going to get back to Asgard, et cetera, et cetera. Odin is gone with his battle from Surtur. And Thor has no idea. I guess the big question, who is going to rule Asgard? So that's something that's talked about in these issues too. And really, it feels like these issues are little one-offs for Simonson to take a breather after that huge run that he did and tell some more fun stories, I think, is what he was trying to do. So thoughts on these issues?
I mean, it was interesting to see when I started reading them, and I was like, oh, well, here's the underpinnings for the foundation, I'd say, for like the Ragnarok movie, because you can see with Odin gone and Hela comes in, and I was like, right. There's that, so that was kind of interesting to see. I mean, I forgot about that whole story with Thor and Freya, and him with that giant who he ended up, Hela attacked him, and then he was staying with that giant for a while, and it was kind of interesting. I mean, it seemed odd to me, I guess, now, and that's, I guess, my experience that I can correlate with that now, is like when I'm watching those scenes or reading those scenes in New York, it was kind of like, all right, it's like you see Beta Ray Bill walking down, Fifth Avenue, and
nobody's New York in the 80s, and nobody notices.
Yeah, nobody. And then it got even more absurd, because then Sif gave him like the fake glasses with the nose and the mustache, and I'm like, really? But it's
looks so distinguished.
Yeah, exactly. So I mean, that was kind of interesting, because you had that dichotomy, because it kept flipping back and forth, so you were in Asgard, then you were in Midgard, and I still enjoyed. I mean, they held up for me. I mean, I hadn't read them for God knows how long, so I was kind of glad that you did this, because I haven't read that Simonson run in decades. So.
This was my first time reading any of those issues. Yeah.
Oh wow! Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, same here.
Same for me.
Yeah.
Oh wow! Okay.
Because
it would have been for me too. I never read them.
Yeah, like when we talked before, when Bryan and I talked about, I had collected Thor from not the beginning of the Beta Ray Bill saga or Ballad of Beta Ray Bill, but somewhere right around where Malekith was first introduced, up until issue maybe 353, but I think at least definitely up to 350. And I had collected those as a kid, but then when we read them, I read them all for the, and it's like reading them for the first time because they're so chock full of, modern artists need to read that run, and it's like 5 issues in one issue because he's so, the panels are small, the artwork is still intricate, and then to your point about the scenes, he's kind of really just doing like every scene is only 1 or 2 pages. That's it. And you just keep bouncing around. And he doesn't even care if he wraps it up in an issue. He goes, I'll get to it 2 issues down the road. It's such an interesting way to tell a story because it's not just a Thor comic. It's a Thor. It's a Beta Ray Bill. It's Sif. It's Loki. It's Enchantress. It's
Warriors 3.
The Warriors 3. Yeah. So it's so interesting. So interesting.
It's a big cast and it's multiple subplots and it's the way a lot of comics of the era were written.
Yeah.
I'm thinking of the X-Men in particular.
Yeah, for sure.
Oh, sure.
And yet each issue still sort of ends on a cliffhanger every time.
Right.
Even if it's a small one, it's still there. And you're looking forward to next month.
Right. Right. Yeah, I liked that issue with the character that turns out to basically be his great grandfather. And as I was reading it, I was like, okay, he's flipping Mjolnir around.
Yeah.
He knows way too much about Thor. He looks like Odin. I just couldn't remember if it was his or I was like thinking, is it his grandfather or is it his great grandfather? And then by the end, you find out that it is his great grandfather.
That Thor mentions in that story that it was the son of Odin, son of Bor, son of Bori. He gives like a little mini lineage there. I figured.
Right.
There's your foreshadowing.
Yeah.
And it turns out in the end that it was Bori.
Yeah.
Bori.
That was a good issue. It was still sort of humorous, and you got the Sal Buscema artwork that still kind of felt like Simonson to some degree.
Sure.
There looked like I even double checked because the inking looked like Simonson. Obviously, the artwork is very clearly not Simonson. Like you open the first page, I went, "What the hell is this?" And then I had to, and of course, the credits are on the end page in that issue. So I had to flip to the end, and I was like, "What is going?" Oh, Sal Buscema, that explains it.
But the story, I did like the story. I was wondering, is that, I don't know if anybody knows, like it felt like, because Simonson is really big on. My God, he was quoting Lewis Carroll throughout all these issues, and
through Volstagg, no less.
Right. He mentions even Shakespeare a little bit, and Bryan and I already talked about like there's a lot of Tolkien stuff in those Surtur Saga stuff, and
there was a footnote to the Rubaiyat of Omar Khayyam in the one issue.
Yeah. So I wondered if Simonson was basing that story with Thor and his great grandfather on anything, because it just felt like it felt like a Norse myth, a Norse tale,
It did at that, yeah.
It was more Tales of Asgard kind of feel, it's like because everybody was included, and it seemed it wasn't, like it wasn't Thor 75% of the time, and the other ones were around. It was more balanced. Not saying it was balanced, but it was more balanced. So. That's the vibe I got out of it after reading it the second time. I was like, wow, this is like Tales of Asgard kind of thing.
That's cool.
Multiple storylines going on at the same time that are some interwoven, some, there's obvious, foundational underpinnings that tie them together, but, they still are their own story.
Speaking of Buscema, I mean, he starts a huge run with issue 368 up to 382, and some of that with Simonson, I'm pretty sure. So,
yeah,
because Simonson eventually stops drawing the book.
Yeah, so You got Thor Frog to look forward to. After
Frog of Thunder.
Yes.
Frog of Thunder. Yep, I read the first part of that story randomly over the summer. So there's.
Oh wow!
It's like the only other Simonson Thor I've read recently.
Well, that was the tricky thing, trying to figure out how many issues to read, because, as you said, each one does end on a cliffhanger. So it's like, okay, one of these cliffhangers has to kind of resolve everything. So these 6 issues actually were nice, because we do go into some Secret Wars tie-ins, some, Thor, God, Frog of Thunder. So that'll be the next chunk,
block. Yeah.
Yeah. What other, let me say this, words. I've learned a hell of a lot of new words reading Simonson. Like, just let me see if I can even quick. Sachet, where he talks about something about perfume, I think.
Oh, the sachet.
Sachet. Thank you. There you go. See? I don't know. Loki said a word. He says something about remove, meaning remoteness, like just, I've never heard it in that way,
Yep, at a far remove from something.
Yes, and then in a trice, like Simonson's, like, Stan Lee's air and just spitting out these words. I got to look them up.
Did you catch Walton Weasley's cameo?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
In the Hercules issue?
They're like walking out of Central Park or something, and
Yeah.
Yep. I think they showed up. I think Brian's talking about the very last panel of number 359, like as the Asgardians are warping back to Asgard. But yeah, I think there was a little thing with Walton Weasley, or at least their names were carved in a tree in Central Park during the Hercules.
Right.
Okay.
Okay. See, I thought that was Archie Goodwin and because it even says special thanks to Archie Goodwin or something. I thought that was supposed to be Archie and his wife, maybe, but it could be.
That's totally Walt.
Because Archie Goodwin also looks like that. He has in the glasses.
They always had the caricature of the big mustache and
Mm-hmm. That Hercules issue. So there's a fill-in issue. It's Bob Harris writing it, like one of the first comics he had ever written, like the 4th or 5th comic. Mm-hmm. Jackson Geis on pencils before he does X Factor, which was kind of fun, and definitely before he does the Wally West Flash series, and Bob Layton on inks. And it's all about Hercules telling a tale to a young boy who's a big fan of Thor and who's being bullied. And then he's like, Hercules, tell us about Thor, hoping that Hercules will tell good things about Thor. And it's Hercules saying how much he beat up Thor. But then through Jarvis realizes that the kid really wants to hear about Thor. I thought that,
What issue is that?
The last issue?
356. With Hercules?
You might not have that if that's the Simonson. Now that I've realized it, you might not have that if that's a Simonson run.
That's not. I was like, what are you talking about, Hercules? Oh yeah, 356 is not in here.
Oh. It doesn't mean anything to the larger Thor story. It really is just a one-off.
It's a one-shot throwaway, but it's a fun story.
Yeah. And especially with, I know Bob Layton didn't write it, but I really like those Hercules miniseries that Bob Layton did.
Yeah, he did. Yeah. I thought they were really good. I never really cared too much about Hercules, as far as in print form, and then when he brought those out, I was like, oh, this character's kind of interesting, the way he handles it.
Hercules gets Galactus drunk, I think is one of the plot points in this miniseries.
You write what you know, right?
Yeah. I did not know that all of you had not read that before.
Yes.
Kind of surprised to some extent.
And they're wordy, but they're still, and they're not as grand as maybe the Surtur Saga is. But I sort of forgave it because I'm like, yeah, this is the aftermath, right? Like they have to deal with. Thor's being way dramatic in the beginning, and he's like, oh my God, I can't go on. Odin is dead, gone, I love the scene where he, he like punches Loki, and Loki's laying flat on his back and still talking, right? Like you just see his feet, And he's still trying to say to his brother, you're like, okay, all right, think about it. If he was really dead, his power would have transferred, whatever. So clearly that mystery might continue. It's fun seeing Enchantress because she's one of my favorites. And he finally, Simonson finally draws her in this book because her sister Lorelei is the one that's mucking about with Thor, and then she gets entrapped with Loki because of Enchantress. Heimdall gets some play in this, sporting all his powers, his visual powers, which was cool. And Simonson remembering that Sif has a lot of those powers too, that she can transverse, worlds and whatever. So, I still learned a hell of a lot about these characters from just these silly one-off fun issues.
They're still pertinent, they still, and I like that. I like that, the sort of story ended. Well, it's not like, let's just pick up with a new story. You are seeing a new story, but you're also seeing the aftermath of that other story. So it does kind of flow, and, you feel it's not such an intense thing, and there is some fun to it, which is great.
Yeah.
And then you can build up to the next storyline, So I don't know how. I was curious when I was reading this. I was like, I have to think, like, how many issues did he actually do? And then, like, I wonder what his initial thoughts were. Like, how far in advance did he plan? Like, what was his, did he plan to do 12 issues? Did he plan, and maybe he planned to only do up to where the Surtur saga ended. And then maybe let's, well, everything went so well, keep going. I don't know.
We mentioned that in that first episode. He was only scheduled to do 12 issues a year.
Oh, okay.
That's it. And the Surtur saga goes well beyond that.
Beyond that, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So clearly they were happy with what he was doing, and I there's something that I miss about this era of Thor, power wise, look wise. He is still sort of removed from humanity. I love the whole wrapping up of the Donald Blake identity, that Fandral goes to Chicago and,
plays Men in Black by neuralizing those three employees of his.
Yeah. Which also set up stories, many years later. If you're going to get rid of Donald Blake, how do you bring him back? What are some of the other things? Just the little humorous things. The two frost giants in the beginning who want to maybe possibly attack Thor, but he's going all bonkers because he's so sad. So instead they go and attack the kids that had been with Frigga as they went to hide out during the war. And then she turns it on Thor and says, no, let them go. They're in a bad place as well, just like we are. I don't want any more killing. Thor's, the way he apologizes to Sif and realizes what he's been doing to her, even though he was under the enchantment. She's not slowly, she's falling in love with Beta Ray Bill. Like, Simonson's moving them away from their normal relationships and the way people normally did their relationships, and trying to find new ground with this book. It's and whether it worked or, I mean, clearly it's a classic run. It's whether we enjoy it or not, So I like all that. I like the evolution this book is having. So
there's a reason why it was as long as it was, and why it's still held in regard as it is. I mean, it's one of those, at this era, when you had the writer artist, take over a character and a title of a book and do a hell of a run on it, and there's a reason why it has the regard it has.
Adam, any takeaways of what you read?
These few issues of Simonson Thor do answer a long-standing fan question that I have had for a very long time. I'm talking about the subplot involving Sif and Beta Ray Bill on Earth, just to give them some superhero-type business, to inject some action into the book, and also just to give the two of them something to do as they walk around doing their little rom-com get-to-know-you thing around New York City. And so we get Titanium Man, who has a bunch of armored henchmen called the Green Liberation Front, committing robberies for him. They think they're just robbing the government to pay them back for their poor treatment at the hands of the government after Vietnam, because the guys in the suit are Vietnam vets. Mm-hmm. But actually, it's a scheme by Titanium Man and his KGB handlers to destabilize the whole American economy. So, yeah, it was neat to see Beta Ray Bill go up against Titanium Man and all that. But the thing is, the Green Liberation Front they're characters I had actually heard of before I read this story, because one of the first Marvel comics I bought back in 1992, in the wake of Infinity War, was a 64-page one-shot special called Soviet Super Soldiers. I kind of think Fabian Nicieza wrote it, but I'm not sure. And it featured a whole bunch of characters who had ties to or who lived in the Soviet Union in the Marvel Universe at that time. And a couple of members of this armored corps of generic henchmen that appeared in this story, the Green Liberation Front, one of their armor's features is that it converts itself into little two-dimensional credit card-sized cards, just for convenience and stealth purposes. And a few carded members of the Green Liberation Front were found in a desk drawer in the Kremlin in that Soviet Super Soldiers one-shot. And I saw these guys, they were almost immediately killed off as soon as they appeared. But I thought to myself, where have these people appeared before, if anywhere? And now it's 30 years later, but finally I know they first showed up, and pretty much the only other appearance they ever made, other than that one Soviet Super Soldiers one-shot, was here in these few issues of Simonson's Thor run.
Huh.
Nice.
There you go.
So,
The fact that you even remember those characters at all is astonishing to me.
I can't do it for everything, but that's, like I said, it's a very early step on the road to becoming a comics addict. So it lodged visibly in memory as a result of that. I also dug that Tale of Midgard that Peter mentioned. When Fandrel goes to Chicago and visits Don Blake's receptionist and nurse and whatever, and basically says, here's some gold for thy troubles, and let me also take your memories away, and just get out of here. And it's when you think about it, on a metatextual level, he's basically shooing them out the door straight into oblivion, into comics limbo. They're minor supporting characters whose connection to the main character of the series is being severed, so they're basically being handed a gold watch and pushed off a cliff into limbo.
Literally a gold bracelet. Yeah.
Yeah. Little Mjolnir charm on it and everything. The significance of which they won't remember in a couple of seconds.
Right.
And when that happens, those characters are probably never going to appear in a comic again. So it's a little morbid if you think of it that way.
Yeah. So interesting. So that Soviet Super Soldier one shot was from September of 1992, written by Fabian Nicieza. Two pencilers, Javier Saltaris and Angel Medina.
Mm.
There's a little CGS callback.
Was that a square bound comic when they were doing
64 pages? So
I think it was, yeah.
Yeah, like the annuals, they were the square. Yeah, I remember that.
I also wonder if Simonson wrote these stories because he knew or he wanted them to appear in other places. So there's that random footnote, speaking of footnotes, in 354 where Beta Ray Bill is like, oh yeah, I helped to go defeat the dire wraiths over in ROM 65.
ROM Space Knight.
Yeah, right. Which was drawn by Steve Ditko. Those issues were by Ditko when I looked it up. I didn't realize that.
I would like to see Ditko's take on Beta Ray Bill.
Well, he does the take on the whole Marvel universe. There's like this Secret Wars cover #1-esque splash page of like Captain America and Beta Ray Bill and all the other Marvel characters from the 1985 by Ditko. It's very, very strange. There's the random Power Pack cameo because Wheezy is a co-creator of Power Pack, and their book was already going on by this point. And then apparently the Warriors 3 go into Power Pack issue number 15 while they're, traveling around New York City. So now I got to go find that issue and read it. And then one of my favorite things that was going on at Marvel at the time, if you blink, you would miss it, where a random one-off Thor villain, Megatak.
Oh yes, the Scourge of the Underworld
Yes,
strikes.
justice is served.
Hell yes.
I'm glad you brought that up. I wanted to bring that up and I forgot. It was like, wow, that was snuck in there,
Totally snuck in there.
Yeah, that was one of Mark Gruenwald's little side projects. I guess he asked various creators working under him to pick villains that they would like to see eliminated. And I guess Walt Simonson chose Megatak, who is not a character he created. I looked it up. He was created by Doug Munch. And he was he was a one-off early 80s arcade game craze inspired villain. An industrial saboteur who got sucked into a video game he was trying to steal the circuit board from, and he got converted into pixels, and he thought he was the main character from the game, and dumb. And Simonson felt the same way, clearly, because just showing how quickly he got Megatak dusted off in that little Scourge appearance.
It was from Thor 328. Doug Munch and Alan Kupperberg was the artist, and Sif was part of that story. So it kind of makes sense that he appeared in this issue because he was possibly going to go. Right, yeah. And so even if it is a one-off, Simonson really still wrapping it up into the Thor thing. And when I saw it, I was like, what's going on? And then immediately you see, boom, justice is served. I was like, oh my God, I love those Captain America issues. Yes.
Yeah.
Me too.
So
totally.
When I'm reading any of these issues, I'm thinking a lot about like the meta behind it. Just thinking like, there's Walt in his little apartment in Manhattan, and Wheezy's in the apartment. Like how much are they talking to each other? And like when she's writing her comics and everything, like what is their dinner conversation like? So I got this idea for a Thor subplot. What do you think of this? And then how much are they tweaking it? Or like, did they work in silos and not really talk to each other? Or were they constantly doing stuff together? Like, I'd love to know. I just find that so fascinating. How many interesting things were just like a little quick conversation they had, and it spun into some awesome idea that we now is like locked in comic history,
Right.
Oh,
like if like that conversation between Beta Ray and Sif about, they have to go their separate ways. She doesn't really want to. Like, does he say to Wheezy, like, okay, if I say this to you as a potential, like, what would your response be? And then he's like, oh, that's good. I like that. Let me write that down. Like, that would be amazing.
Or does she go, Walt, no woman would ever respond to that. You have to make him say this. And he says, okay, yes, dear, that's much better. Right.
Yeah.
Like, there's probably some of both. Right. But it would be so great to know.
Yeah. I mean, I just was like almost defaulted the fact that they had to.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's like a collaborative thing, I would believe, that they could bounce ideas off each other and talk about these things, and each doing their own separate projects. And I would just think that with the relationship they have and had at that time, that
right, because clearly that's what the Power Pack stuff came from.
Yeah,
like what either Simonson was like, oh yeah, I'll promote your book in my book. Or she's like, promote my book in your book. Like it went one way or the other.
Were there any other married couples that were like that? I know, like more recently, it's Matt Fraction and Kelly Sue DeConnick, right? We're both doing stuff, but like in all of comics history, has there been a power couple quite like the Simonsons?
Well, I don't know. I mean, for the duration of time, I don't think so. I mean, there's been couples before that have worked together. I mean, the one that jumps to me right first is Lynn Varley and Frank Miller.
Okay, right. That was a little like, not that I'm not taking anything away from her talent, right? But like she, to my knowledge, she didn't do like nearly as much volume of work as like Wheezy did, right? Like,
right. No, not at all. Yeah, I mean, she obviously had a illustrious career in comics, and then I don't know what the hell she's doing, but yeah, I don't. I mean, somebody that's been for that duration. I mean,
Wendy and Richard Pini of ElfQuest.
There you go.
Yeah. that-
Jimmy Palmiotti and Amanda Connor.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, that's
Example.
another good one. Yeah.
Yep. Carl Kiesel and Barbara Randall Kiesel were married for a while, but again,
Yeah.
that didn't last all that long.
Yeah, that's an interesting question.
Because some of the things that both of them were responsible for, just like all
Yeah.
of Walt's runs of things, and then New Mutants and Death of Superman. I mean, there a bigger comic than Death of Superman for a long time. That was like a massive thing, and it's like maybe it wasn't the world's greatest comic or anything, but like she wrote it. That was her deal, right? Like you got to give credit, right?
When you were talking about that, about the dinner table talk, I was wondering if they were sitting there and she's like, "Yeah, I'm on Superman," and he's like, "What if he died?" Great. That went off.
That story is actually they used to start doing the summits, like they would get all the Superman editors together or Batman. And they said every year they would say, "What should we do with Superman this year?" And somebody would go, we should kill him. And then the next year, "What should we do? So we should kill him. You silly." And then one year they were like, "We should kill him." And they all went,
We have no better ideas.
Yeah, exactly.
"Let's kill him." You should, there's a Chris Claremont documentary on Prime.
Yeah, I watched that.
Right. And it has like Ancestry and Wheezy is on that too. And the three of them, I think the three of them are like sitting on a couch talking about a lot of like X-Men stuff.
Yeah, I saw
They're
that.
almost like that's almost like a married conversation, because you could tell it, and it really hit me that the X-Men line had these really great female editors, and Claremont had to bounce off of them. And that's the reason why they went off and wrote the way they did, because they probably got some really good experience as part of that trio, whatever you want to call it. So if anybody hasn't seen that and you want some behind the scenes stuff about the X-Men, that's a great documentary for that.
Yeah.
Really, yeah, it is.
There's a couple of them on Prime. There's a Grant Morrison one. I remember the Claremont one. There's another
I'll have
one.
to look those up.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're great.
There's a couple of them.
Just put in like comic books or comics in the search engine, and you'll see like a whole bunch of stuff come up.
Because once you find one, then they always have the suggested.
Yeah.
And then you'll see the other ones on the bottom too.
The other one
that'd be cool.
I really liked is the image one, which is a lot of that information we know, but they actually have footage from people standing in lines waiting to get signatures in that time in the 90s. It's really great. It's really great.
Talk about nostalgia.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Did you see? I don't know if any of you are going back to Ed Piskor. If any of you are friends with him, but he recently posted on Facebook. One of his buddies, somebody drew a thing for, because there's always like people are afraid to say his name the way it's actually supposed to be said, because no one wants to say piss in his name if you don't know, because it sounds like you're being a total jerk to him or whatever. Mm-hmm. But I remember him telling me in person, like, my name is Piskor. Like, and so somebody drew like an image style comic book cover where it said piss and then CORPS, with dots in between, like core. And he was like, "Yes, this is my name." And it was pretty great. I'll see if I can send it to you.
That's funny.
Yeah. But it was total nostalgia to make it look like an old. Yeah.
Gives a whole new meaning to Wetworks.
Womp, womp, womp.
Wait, speaking of nostalgia, you want some CGS nostalgia, some CGS history that I pulled out?
Oh God,
hit us with it.
Here we go.
Speaking of Wetworks, I was like, "Where's this going?"
Yeah. No poop stories, Peter.
No, I'm focusing on the month of January since we're recording this January 19th. January 19th, 2006, episode 97, a conversation with Charlie Huston.
Oh man!
Oh wow!
Oh boy!
Remember that one?
Yeah, I do.
About the point I'm right up to.
Bored that guy to tears. He had patience, man. I'll tell you what.
Wait, Adam, what did you say?
I said that run of Moon Knight, like is about what I'm read up to.
Didn't we like that run? I thought we liked those 6. No, did we not like those 6 issues that he did? No.
Well, he did 13. I mean, he was originally supposed to.
I just meant the first story arc.
The first story arc.
Mm.
It was all right. I mean,
okay. I didn't remember.
I've read.
I know when I remember, if I remember correctly, when I did the review on the show, when I first read it, it was just okay. And then
David,
I seem to, actually, I'm wrong. I seem to enjoy it more when I was reading it monthly. And then when I ended up, I think it was backwards. I ended up reading the trade and I was like, oh, it actually reads better now, because I was able to read it. It flowed better having to be able to read 6 issues in a row.
It's a bit decompressed.
Yeah. So that's what it was. I didn't enjoy it as much in the single issues, but the trade, I enjoyed it more, but it still ended flat. I really, I still,
I read that
Taskmaster
novel
thing.
he wrote too. That novel that he.
Oh yeah, I love
read that
Caught
too.
Stealing was great. I mean,
Something about the vampires. Something about Vampire Dad or something like that. Wasn't that him?
that might have been.
Am I thinking somebody else?
Yeah, that wasn't. Yeah, that was he didn't. His was more like grit noir.
Oh, okay.
So what that Caught Stealing had come out before he did his Moon Knight run, and I read that, and that was a great novel. I enjoyed that. I enjoyed that more than I like Moon Knight. But because that was a novel that as I was reading it, it was like I didn't want to put it down.
Yeah, Already Dead. It was one of his Joe Pitt.
Yeah, that's what. Yeah, later on. Yeah.
Okay.
He elaborated on his own little universe kind of thing.
Yeah. All right. January 26th, 2006 was when we released episode 100. So
Wow. God.
we hit 100 episodes, not even a year into the show.
We're insane.
A little bit.
We were young.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the key thing.
Nothing to do. January 10th of 2007, we released an episode where we started to take a look at Beauty and the Geek with Mario. Remember those episodes?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Wow.
that reality show.
Oh, God.
Right. January 14th, 2008, episode 355 with Mr. Sergio Aragonis.
That was a long time ago, man.
Yeah. Let me see. I'll save that one. January 26th, 2010, episode 774. We did a wrap-up episode of all the seasons of Lost before the final episode. I remember that being... that was a big deal for us.
Yes.
Yeah. January 10th, 2011, we released episode 1000, like the actual... it was like the actual episode 100, not the one where we counted all our episodes up to 1000. So it was the episode 1000. And then I skipped one. January 21st, 2008, episode 359 was our coverage on Comics Now #1.
Wow.
Right. We published a magazine once.
2008, 15 years ago, right?
It's crazy.
So there you go. A little trip down
My
CGS history.
Not only is it crazy for all that was happening, but what happened to all that time? 15 years.
I know.
Jeez.
I remember I was working in Chesterbrook, so just outside of King of Prussia at the time, and when the Comics Now came out. And so my buddy and I at lunch quick drove to Bryn Mawr to Showcase Comics to like see it on the shelf. And there's a picture of me like holding the magazine and on next to the shelf with the stack of magazines. It was like, wow, it's pretty rad, my God. And then what's funny is I remember going like, so the job that I had at Chesterbrook outside King of Prussia, I remember I was driving before I got that job. I worked in Allentown, Bethlehem, actually. And I was driving down 476 to get to the Philly area to go to the interview for that job in Chesterbrook. And while I'm driving, my phone rings and I answer the phone and it's freaking Frank Bador. The
Looking Glass Wars author.
Mm-hmm.
Looking Glass Wars.
Yeah.
He was the guy who was the producer of There's Something About Mary, because we had met him and interviewed him a little bit, and he called me because he wanted my advice for something. I don't even remember what. And I'm just like, I'm talking to a millionaire who, and again, at the time, like this was only 2006. Something About Mary wasn't that old, and it was a huge success, still a very popular, film. like, what is my life? I don't even know what's happening. And like, I waltz into this interview all cocksure because it's like, I just had a Hollywood producer call me. Take that. And nailed the interview and got the job. And then it was like a whole thing. It's like, it's all connected, man.
So weird. It was so weird getting the email and like the one guy emailing us and saying, oh yeah, we have a bunch of Simpsons animators that listen to your show. And then I remember one time going to, I'm sure this is on one of the, many, like the Emerald Comic-Con wrap-ups. Like, I was a frequent, visitor of a lot of strip clubs every time we would go to the club. And I went to a strip club in Seattle with a fairly high prominent person in television, that was listening to our show. That was like, he was like, don't say anything. I'm like, I won't say anything. And I was just like, okay, like, wow, crazy times. Not the name drop or star drop or whatever.
No, yeah, that's not
so
what
who
it
was it?
I can't say. I'm not
No
gonna say.
statute of limitations.
Yo, man. Yo, I'll tell you off air. No. Okay, are we good?
Yeah.
Any final words?
I know there was one more thing I was going to say. It's not comic related, but TV related, since we've been talking about that a bunch.
Sure.
So we just finished tonight before recording a super interesting series on Netflix called Kaleidoscope. Have you heard about this?
Mm-mm.
So it's a heist show. 9 episodes. It's a once and done. There won't be a season 2 or anything. But what's interesting is every person, when they log into Netflix and they go, oh, I'm going to watch this show, the episodes are all shuffled. So everybody watches it in a different order.
Oh, really?
It doesn't matter how you watch the episodes or what order that you watch them, because the way that it's written, it all just sort of connects, and it doesn't matter which order you watch them in.
Huh.
So it's really, because the episodes are all named, like the pink episode, the blue episode, the red episode. They're not numbered, but it puts them in an order for you, and then you just watch it. So everybody's experience is different.
Wow.
And it was super cool. And Giancarlo Esposito is the main character. So it's got like acting chops.
Oh,
right?
wow, cool.
Definitely recommend, especially if you like heist movies, which
I
we
love heist movies.
Yeah, they're like the best, right? So you definitely check it out.
I will.
Wow.
That's good, because I'm looking for something to watch, a series. So put that right in the queue.
And I've never seen anybody do this where the order doesn't matter.
Yeah, I've never heard of that.
I've never heard of that.
That's
There's always at least some kind of order you have to watch it in.
I think everybody sees the one episode last, but
Okay.
the other 8, it's different per person, right?
Okay.
So
wow. That seems like a monumental task to be able to pull that off.
Yeah.
that's cool. It was fun.
Yeah, it's very cool.
We had one more thing on our list, but it's running late. The 30th anniversary of Vertigo is this month too, so we'll just say that.
Oh, we should read a couple
Something.
Vertigo comics.
Yeah, I would
there
like
on
to
the
do
app.
that if we're going to do that, because that's why, when I saw you had that included in the email and stuff, and I was like, I would like to read some of that stuff, and so I had some sort of context.
It's on the DC app. There, everything.
Yeah,
There's a whole. Okay, we'll do that for next time.
Yeah.
Maybe just like a couple first issues or mini.
Yeah, whatever.
Yeah.
From 1992, or just from that general period, like a couple of years, give or take?
I have no thoughts on that. We can figure it out. We can suss it out.
Yeah.
It would be.
I mean, because the images you included with the email, I was thinking like, well, at least read the first issue of each one of those that was included in the promotion.
That's what I was sort of thinking. Like, do we read the first issues of the new titles that came out? Like, not the ones
Not
that
Hellblazer and Sandman.
right? Like, what was new that had the new Vertigo logo? Because they clearly were specifically written for this new brand. Imprint. So that could be cool. All right, yeah, we'll research that. That'd be fun.
Okay. Sounds good to me.
Until next time.
Until next.
Yeah. What do we?
Okay.
What's the title? the bar now is so high for creative titles.
I know.
We're
I mean, do we
doing it to
just
ourselves?
do we just go normal this time around just to trip them out? You know, like
I think they'd just be disappointed.
like I almost wanted to say piss Thor, but that's like that's
Ooh, yeah.
that's too. I don't know if iTunes will like that.
Nah.
That's funny though.
I know it's funny, but no, we can't do it.
Leave this bit in so they know that you had the best idea and we settled for second best.
I don't normally put these in, but I'll put this in after.
Maybe at least
after
that
the music.
snippet. Yeah.
Yeah,
Right,
yeah. I'll do it after the music ends and then put that in.